Hi everyone, hopefully you guys are doing well. Welcome to another session of advanced performance management as well as performance management, right? This session is important for both of the exams because we are now going to cover the principles of BB. Now, what's BB? It's basically beyond budgeting, right? It's basically beyond budgeting, right? So again, a theoretical topic, again a theoretical topic, but this is tested and this can be tested, right? This is tested and this can be tested in your paper. In fact, in the last question, the past paper that we attempted, we realized that there were some extracts, right? We realized that there were some extracts that tested beyond budgeting, right? That tested beyond budgeting. In fact, I can show you here. Yeah, beyond budgeting approach and an evaluation of the potential of such a change at RL. So here, what we are going to do, we're going to be understanding the need, that why beyond budgeting is required, right? Why beyond budgeting is required. I have extracted a book extract here, right? I have made a books extract here, like BVP's books extract here, so you can also read this. In fact, I'll at last guide you some chapters that you have to read definitely, right? In fact, at last I'll ask you some chapters to read while the end of, yeah. So we are discussing the beyond budgeting approach, that how this approach should be working. And obviously, I've extracted some of the books notes here, and in fact, some of the chapters needs to be read via BVP while attempting this paper, right? For APM, I'll specially guide to read some chapters, right? To read some chapters from BBP, and I'll let you know. Kindly text me in personal. Kindly text me in personal, and I'll let you know that which chapters to be read, right? So some chapters needs to be read here, and this approach is being tested also, right? This approach is being tested also. Now, the beyond budgeting means, what does it mean? Beyond budgeting means moving ahead or away from old traditional budgets, right? Like you cannot rely on old traditional budgets. You cannot rely on old traditional budgets. Beyond budgeting means moving ahead from old traditional budgets, because people think that old traditional budgets are people think that old traditional budgets are time consuming. Okay, they are very time consuming in making. Like I remember my time of making budgets for my employer, it requires many nights of work, right? You have to work sleeplessly and you have to make the full complete budget and present it to board, right? So it was a greater, I'll say, time consuming, right? It was a greater time being consumed, right? And there were certain other problems, unrealistic. Sometimes it was unrealistic as well. Like if I give you an example, in our budget, we kept the USD rate at 200, but at the same year, the average rate of USD at the actual position was 300, right? So see, we budgeted, because in our country, the inflation is derived through USD rate, right? So while making the budget, I myself took an assumption that our annual closing or average rate will be 200, and I prepared whole budget accordingly. But in actual, when the results arises, so the actual USD rate was 300. Actual USD rate was 300. So sometimes your making of budget seems to be unrealistic, very unrealistic, right? Sometimes they be like that. Sometimes they be like that. And this is why you need a beyond budgeting approach, right? You need a beyond budgeting approach because the traditional budgets seems to be time consuming, seems to be unrealistic, right? Seems to be unrealistic. You can say that assumptions being taken, assumptions, it's totally an assumptions driven budget, right? While beyond budgeting asks you to work on actual numbers rather than going on assumptions driven numbers, right? Rather than going on assumptions driven number, right? So these are the things that drive. These are the things that drive to make yourself go ahead of your budgets and think beyond budgeting. Now, what does beyond budgeting means? Like, forget the traditional things because they were time consuming, they were unrealistic, they were assumptions driven. Just I gave you example of my corporate career here, that what we faced while assuming the dollar rate. So that means that you should be having an approach that's not following these things, and that approach is beyond budgeting, right? And that approach is beyond budgeting. Okay, that approach is beyond budgeting. Now, one of the student is if asked that what's the difference between traditional and beyond budgeting? Huh? One of the students if asked what's the difference between traditional and beyond budgeting, right? So if I wanted to write the difference between traditional and beyond budgeting, so I'll say that traditional, I'll say that traditional, right? And beyond budgeting, okay? Now we have a past paper to be done after this, right? Because this was tested in robust laptop as well. So traditional budgeting and beyond budgeting, if I wanted to say that what is traditional budgeting, or if I wanted to say how can we overcome beyond budgeting, so it's simple. If you need to highlight its differences, so budget type. If you see that in traditional approach, the budget type is simply the fixed annual plan, right? The budget type is simply the fixed annual plan, right? Whereas in beyond budgeting, what's that? In beyond budgeting, you have rolling budgets, right? We have done some questions of rolling budgets as well. Huh? We have done some questions of rolling budgets as well. So budget types means fixed annual plan. There have some rolling budgets. Similarly, beyond budgeting also focuses on, similarly, also it focuses on non-financial performance target, right? Non-financial performance target. In traditional budgets, you are too focused on financial key metrics, right? But if you ask about beyond budgeting, so they say that focus on non-financial performance target as well, like customer satisfaction, occupancy rates, and these type of KPMs, which we have done in the KPI section, that you should be focusing on beyond, you should be focusing on beyond types of budget, right? So beyond budgeting means that you should be focusing on non-financial performance targets as well, right? Similarly, if we talk about another difference, it's targets and rewards. Huh? Similarly, if we talk about another difference, it's target and rewards. Now, what are the target and rewards? It's simply incremental targets, right? Incremental targets and fixed rewards. In traditional budgeting, you have targets incremental to the previous year. In traditional budgeting, you have targets incremental from the previous year, but the rewards are kind of a fixed. Rewards here are kind of a fix. They do not care what you have currently or what you are doing currently. The rewards are fixed, whereas the targets have been incremented from the previous year, right? The targets have been incremented from the previous year, okay? And here, the targets are relative targets, right? As per situation. These are relative targets as per situations and relative rewards and relative rewards. Now see, if I give you an example of my career, like when we faced this situation in our country that our budget was made at this rate and the actual was made at this rate. So ideally, the beyond budgeting approach says that update your budget according to this rate, right? So it's beyond budgeting. In traditional budgeting, the budgets are fixed. But in beyond budgeting, you have to update. Your budget is relative. It's not absolute that you have to follow. It's made in some assumptions or some circumstances that you have to follow, and it's totally, I'll say, not fixed. Whereas in traditional, it's totally fixed. Whereas in traditional, it's totally fixed, right? And if we talk about resources, so here the resources are predefined resources, right? So resources here, the resources are predefined resources, and here the resources are on demand resources. Like in traditional, in beyond budgeting, resources can be demanded. In traditional budgeting, resources can be demanded. It's totally up to you. You can demand your resources up to the mark, right? You can demand your resources up to the mark. Similarly, traditional budgeting is more of a centralized budgeting, right? It's been a consolidation, it's been centralized budgeting, okay? Centralized budgeting and focus on numbers here, right? Centralized budgeting and focus on numbers here, right? And similarly, if I talk about beyond budgeting, it's more of a decentralized, right? And it focuses, rather than on numbers, it focuses on value creation, right? Rather than focusing on numbers, it focuses on value creation. It focuses on value creation, right? So it's your, if I talk about the culture. So here are some of the key differences that I highlighted. Here are some of the key differences as per my book. Uh, these are the differences of traditional budgeting as well as these are the differences of traditional budgeting as well as beyond budgeting. Any questions, guys, still here? Since I have the tech, so I can move things here. Yeah. So if someone asks you or the requirements ask you to highlight the traditional and beyond budgeting, so it's quite simple, right? Highlight the traditional and beyond budgeting or the differences, so it's quite simple. Now, what does BBB says? What does BPP says for principles of beyond budgeting, right? So see, it says you clearly that there is no defined list of BB principles, right? It says you clearly that there is no defined principle of BB principle. There is no defined approach of uh, beyond budgeting, right? However, there are some common best practices. So one person should be remembering that there is no rules for the beyond budgeting. It's simple. There is no rules for beyond budgeting. It's simple. It's simple. And what's that? It's that there are some common best practices. Now, what are the common best practices? It's simple. Governance and transparency, right? Employees are bound by a clear organizational mission and set of values to common cause rather than being controlled by a central plan. So employees should be clear. Huh? Sometimes it's your budgeting exercise, but employees doesn't know about your approach. So employees should be clear and driven that what they are budgeting, how they are being controlled. There should be a good governance and the shared values, and information should be open and transparent rather than restricted and controlled. Whoever involved in the budgeting team, whoever involved in the budgeting team shall be transparent, right? Shall be transparent, right? Similarly, and I'm not saying that budgets should be clearly and communicated to each and everyone in that entity, yeah, but to the relevant ones, right? Similarly, accountable teams, huh? There should be a network of accountable teams. Like one should be responsible. Now that's a beyond budgeting thing, huh? That one should be responsible. Huh? One should be responsible. Like you cannot ask that there is no responsibility, right? So if there is responsibility, then there can be the empowerment culture. Then there can be the trusted to regulate the trusted or regulated culture. So if there is an accountability, there will be no micromanagement, right? It will be accountability that if there is an accountability, so there will be no micromanagement, right? Okay. So team managers and employees are given a high degree of freedom in budgeting. You cannot restrict them, right? They need high degree of freedom. You cannot limit them, right? So they need a high degree of freedom, and you cannot ask persons to be limited in that, right? To be limited in that. You will read some things, and you have read that in SPL as well, business process re-engineering, total quality management. You guys have read that, right? And we'll be reading it again, obviously. And teams are responsible for relationships. Yeah, teams are responsible for relationships. So you should be maintaining relationships with the customers, suppliers, and stakeholders. Okay. And budgets may still be used, but they'll be obviously local level, right? You cannot say that beyond budgeting ask you not to make budgets. You have to make budgets, but they'll be at a local level, right? They'll be made using the local knowledge. Huh? But for beyond budgeting approach, you should be following these hierarchies. You should be following these hierarchies, right? There should be range of challenges, huh? And they should be controllable. Like if you're giving a challenge or goal or target, and that's not controllable for a person, so how do I be performing? So that particular thing should be in control of mine and should create shareholder value. That particular thing should be in control of mine and should be having that shareholder value. If you're giving me a target, that should be implementing the shareholders value, right? If you're giving me a target, that should be making or focusing of creation of shareholders value, right? And recognizing the importance of both financial measures, okay, as well as non-financial measures. Huh? Targets should be based on external benchmarks, right? The targets should be in comparison with the market. So what we studied in the beyond budgeting, what we studied in beyond budgeting, it's quite simple. Huh? It's quite simple that there's no defined list of budgeting principles. The traditional budgets are kind of an outdated, which you have studied in your PM, in your APM, in fact, in your MA paper. If you're focusing on the budgeting principles, there are certain common best practices. Like there should be clear set of values, there should be a governance, information should be transparent, planning and control, guys. There should be a good planning and good control, right? No top-down annual event. Do you guys know the top-down annual event means the top guys will be deciding and the down guys will be following. So there should be an equal opportunity rather than a person being deciding or rather than a person being following, right? Rolling budgets can be used. Rolling budgets are very, and in fact, we have attempted one past paper of it as well, static COA. Rolling budgets may be used because they are really beyond budgeting. Huh? They're really focusing on beyond budgeting. Rather than making the full budget, you make a 3 months or 2 months budget, right? Quickly, it just changes in the organization. So the focus is on future events, not on the past. One thing to be successful, focus on the future rather than on the past. Huh? Control should be existing, right? And there should be fast and frequent feedback, right? There should be a fast and frequent feedback. Now, here's an example in your book. Now, what's that? It's an example that a company followed world-class management model. See, what's that? Huh? See, what's that? So Toyota is an example of an organization that has moved away from traditional budgetary methods for control. So Toyota, you must have heard the name of Toyota. They have moved from the traditionally budgetary method to the organizational control. In fact, some of you guys might have been working in Toyota, so you must be knowing this, right? So it's the best manufacturing companies, best manager. In Toyota, production systems are legendary. And I'm not saying that your book have mentioned this. So they must have verified also. Huh? Management focuses on continuous improvements and meeting customer needs. Everyone has a voice and expected to contribute for continuous improvements for their work. Medium-term goals aim the best practices. Planning takes place at the team level and happens monthly with a clear strategic framework. So rather than going for top down, the top guys decide and the down guys follow. It's a teamwork that plays, right? 12 months rolling forecast support capacity planning. So it's the rolling forecast as well. Resources are made available just in time to meet each customer order. There are no fixed targets, no annual budget constraints. People are trusted with information. See that the main thing of beyond budgeting, no fixed targets, no annual budget constraints. People are trusted and make them right decisions. You ask your people, those who are dealing with the problem, to take the right decision. You ask your people, those are dealing with those problems, to take the right decision. Now, this is a world-class management model because in the traditional approach, you just give them a paper or budget and they have to follow. But here, you give them the decision-making power. That is just a page, right? It was made like this. There's no fixed thing. Take your decisions. There are no constraints. People are trusted. You allow them to take decision. And this is why Toyota is being numbered as a world-class model that follows beyond budgeting. Like budget is not the thing to be followed. Huh? Budget is not everything. What does beyond budgeting means? You should be thinking beyond it rather than following a particular budget. Huh? Rather than following a particular budget. So there are some advantages and disadvantages of beyond budgeting as well, right? There are some advantages and disadvantages. So in advantage, planning is continuous, right? An organization is more likely to be proactive. You are proactive here rather than reactive, right? And obviously you're not, if there's a requirement of disadvantages or advantages, so you're not going to be writing or copy paying it, you will be linking it with the scenario. We are going to attempt some past papers So you'll be linking it with scenario rather than following it completely. Yeah? Linking it with scenario rather than following it completely. Yeah? So rather than reactive changes to its environment, lower cost results from move away from the concept of budget, because in the budget there are many costs being incurred. So if you're not focusing that much on budget, so you're going to be having a good control over that. Similarly, targets will be more challenging as they will be external focus rather than a paper focus. Now they will be external focus, and staff would have made their target or contributed in the making of those target, right? So they also make the organization more customer and supplier more focused, right? They also make the organizations more customer and suppliers more focused, right? So organization becomes innovative through the beyond budgeting. It becomes innovative, right? Managers are more involved in decision making. Yeah. So not the top down, not the top down. They are involved in the decision making, right? Better decisions because they are the ones dealing with the problems. So it's a better decisions for them. Similarly, managers can take decisions much more quickly. Approvals processes, these are not being followed. You can take your decisions quickly. Traditional budgets are fixed. It creates information system which provides fast and open information, right? It creates your information system that provides fast, and it creates information system that provides fast and open information throughout the organization, right? So what can be the disadvantage? See, talking is easy, implementation is difficult, right? Planning, coordination, it's difficult. It's not that much easier. The added impact, the reward system, designing a reward system itself is not easy, right? Designing a reward system. I knew one person from my entity resigned because of the reward system. So designing a reward system is not an easy thing, right? It's not an easy thing to be talked about, right? Similarly, similarly, if you set an unrealistic target, if you set an unachievable target, then how this can be followed? Huh? If you set an unreachable target, then how this can be followed? So it's not target should be viewed as challenging stretch, right? Rather than unachievable. If some people are seeing the revised targets as unachievable, so it might not be motivating them. It might not be motivating them. There are some certain organizations in which the goals are not clearly communicated, right? So if goals are not communicated, how you will how you will believe that your employees are acting towards your goal. Your goal should be clearly communicated to the people. Huh? Your goal should be clearly communicated to the people. Okay. Organizations that move to a BB can often face a lot of resistance, right? You cannot easily just switch, right? Like you're following the traditional budgets and now you're just following uh, the revised budgeting. So it's not easy, right? It's not easy. And the new system implementation is always difficult, right? So it will be a disadvantage. I'll write here that new system implementation is always a difficult one. Okay. So new system implementation is always a difficult one. Very difficult and impractical to adopt the culture of decentralization. Now think of it. Like you're working in a centralized structure where each and everything is being decided by the seniors, and all of a sudden the power is given to the juniors, or they have been given an authority to decide. So it's very impractical. Some people are not eligible to take a decision, right? Some people are not even eligible to take a decision. So what to do there, right? And similarly, up to date information, accurate information, making budgets again and again can be a costly investment, right? Can be a costly investment. Keeping your information up to date, costly investment. Guys, you don't have to remember this. You'll have a scenario in which you have to write advantages and disadvantages of beyond budgeting, and you can take that, right? And you can take that. So, any questions here? If you guys have, you can ask. Any questions here? If you guys have, you can ask. Otherwise, we'll move on to the past paper. Yeah. So let's have a discussion. Guys, beyond budgeting is important. They can give you easily 10 marks for this, right? Easily 10 marks. And 10 marks at APM level is very good. So an expansion of operations of beyond budgeting approach and evaluation of potential of such a change at RL. Now see, you have to evaluate a potential of such a change. So what you have to do, you have to evaluate the particular potential of such a change at RL. You have to evaluate of particular potential at such a change at RL. So you have studied this question in the previous class. You know how RL works. You have a good idea that RL is basically our laptop manufacturer, right? It's a laptop manufacturer, and it has many customers that it deals with. And CEO wants in financial control here. CEO is making a pricing on basis of markup of 45%. You read that, right? In fact, we attempted this requirement of 15 marks here. You must have seen this, right? It requires a lot of efforts to write here, huh? So we have done that. Now, what they want to move to the beyond budgeting approach, and they want to evaluate. So you have to discuss and see if the verb is evaluate. The verb is evaluate. So what you have to do, you simply have to write pros and cons. But again, linking it with a scenario, linking it with a scenario. You just have to write pros and cons and linking it with a scenario. That's it. You just have to write pros and cons and then link it with the scenario. That's it. Right? So let me bring up the answer here, that what points can be written now. Yeah. So this was the question that we attempted. I've taken the examiner answer, that how examiner writes, right? Examiner answer of RL part B that have tested beyond budgeting. They want you to write, they want you to write simple four things. And what are that? They want you to write simple four things. And what are that? That how do we apply beyond budgeting? Now you should have a good grip on the question, right? We have read this question in the last class, that RL is a laptop manufacturer, right? Had same finance director many years, who wants the systems organically, but fall in profitability. CEO has been appointed, right? And financial control systems are being made. Wants to begin thinking about the pricing. CEO wants new pricing, right? And they are charging this percentage. The main control system is the annual budget. Here's the main thing. It's a control system. It's set start of the financial year, and variances are monitored, acted upon by line managers. The CEO has been reading about major companies that have stopped using budgets, right? And how radical move and why company might take such a step. He has been worried by moves by competitors into RL's market with an impressive new products and this has created unrest among the staff. So they want these new budgeting tactics, and they have asked you to evaluate, please, because you have read the budgeting. Now, while reading examiner answer, right, I always prefer, see, I'm writing something here. I always prefer for you guys, it's my notes, prefer reading examiner answer. I can write this answer by myself as I've done of the previous part as well, but reading an examiner answer, it would allow you to note down some extra points. And that's what exactly you need. It would allow you to note down some extra points, and that is what exactly is required here. And that is what exactly is required here. You should be jotting down some points, right? For 10 marks effectively, I would prefer 6 or 7 points. Yes, examiner has written more, but again, it's for your points making. They do not expect you, right? They don't expect from a student to write like this. They don't expect from you guys. They don't expect it all from you guys. But again, reading would allow you, right? Reading would allow you to have some jotting down, some good points, and those good points can easily give some marks. And the target is 50, guys. You have to score 50 anyhow. So monitoring of variances between actual and budgeted is a primary control mechanism. You are not doing any new thing. It's a primary control mechanism that every entity does, right? So dropping the process, which makes some major parts of finance, right, is likely to be greeted with a surprise. So you cannot just easily quit it. You cannot just easily quit it. It's not that easy. It's your departmental efforts. It's your major part of finance that's being followed. So you cannot easily just move away from this. The process as going beyond budgeting involves replacing the annual system of centrally created budget. See, points jotting, centralized structure. You're using that point with a flexible system of targets, decentralized, beyond budgeting. Performance measurement changes from monitoring variances, measuring achievement of strategic goals, performance against suitable benchmarks. You're not going to write like this, but some of the points, if you have gotten down and beyond budgeting, it will allow you to have some great numbers in your paper. The new system will use forecast produce, regularly reviewed by the managers, thus devolving decision-making forecast, importance of cash flow monitoring rather than cost control. See, in beyond budgeting, the cash flow monitoring is also important. Whereas in budgeting, in traditional budgets, the cost controls are the main thing. You're focusing on the cost to be controlled. The targets are intended to guide rather than constraint. Yeah, in traditional budgets, the targets are the constraints. You have to follow anyhow. But here, the targets are the guide. There's a difference between a constraint, a limitation, and a guide, right? So the approach of beyond budgeting is considered appropriate in industries and rapid changes in the business. Yeah, the beyond budgeting approach is very suitable, guys, very suitable for the rapid changes business. If your business is rapidly changing, the beyond budgeting approach is really fine, right? This appears to be the case for RL. Now here comes linking with a scenario. Linking with a scenario. It operates in a sector-dominated technological change. The traditional budgetary approach has drawn criticism as it sets fixed targets which are not responsive to change during the budget period, right? And the method also sits uncomfortably. Management methods such as total quality approaches, continuous improvement of process, budgets can also struggle organization using radical changes approaches such as business process reengineering. If your business is changing, evolving, then a fixed budget is not the complete solution, right? And one thing RL is currently suffering, RL CEO is changed. So it has been going through poor performance and likely to feature of its operation in the near future. So change would be good here. Change is very likely to feature of its changes very likely to feature of its in the near future, right? If you have written half of the points that examiner has made, you would have got easy marks there, 6 or 7 very easy marks. Now students think this requirement is difficult. I myself think this requirement is very easy if you have a good grip on the question as well as a good grip on the topic. So budgets are criticized, stifling creativity. This creativity may help RL in finding solutions, right, in the financial difficulties. Budget can perceive as a top-down control, so conflict while giving all employees power to make decisions, right? Now here's a conflict to the beyond budgeting, that it's a top-down control. So beyond budgeting requires employees to be empowered. So it's a problem here. CEO might not want that. Huh? A culture of innovation help combat the problems and competition position of key staff. So the main thing is that RL is in a problem. So a budget change or a culture change could allow them to perform good, right? Budgets can be gaming behavior and encouraging behavior, right? Act in the interest of expanding or padding their own budgets and overall impact of the company. The focus on value-added targets going to be beyond budgeting helps them die functional behaviors, right? Those behaviors that you cannot control. And then a conclusion para. We have not been taught you that how to write the conclusions. We'll be writing later on many conclusions, but this is how you write an answer for the beyond budgeting. Now, what are the points? What are the points? See, the points that examiner made. The points that examiner made. What are those? It's simple that mechanism change. First point was that you are thinking of changing a mechanism, so it will lead you towards surprise, right? It will lead you towards surprise. The second is defining beyond budgeting. What he did, he defined beyond budgeting in the second para, right? He defined beyond budgeting in the second para. Similarly, preferred by industries, he wrote on preferred by industries, right? Pros and cons, evaluation. So you are writing something good, and then he started criticizing these budgets, right? Empowering employees, right? Decentralized structure. So he criticized here that RL might not be allowing this culture to be followed, right? And similarly, dysfunctional behavior. You cannot expect anything after changing this, although RL is struggling to perform. One point, RL's performance also been referred here. So a change might resolve that. So these are the major points that the examiner made. So if someone have defined these points only in a 3 or 4 liners, just like examiner did more, you'll get the maximum marks. This is the professionalism, guys. This is how the professionals work, right? So any particular questions? Any particular questions here? Any particular questions in this question? You can draft on the basis of these points and send it to me for checking, for sure. Now, guys, let me bring some questions for you, and then we'll attempting that on the software in the next class. Yeah. So, guys, these are the 4 questions that you have to attempt. In fact, I'll be attempting that, right? So far, we haven't had any class on the exam software. So I'll be attempting these questions on exam practice platform, right? So that you have an idea. But so far, the classes are not being uploaded. You can try to solve these questions. I have attached these questions in the PDF sent to you. So you can see these questions and send, and if you wanted to attempt it, simply the budgeting questions, you can attempt and then send it to me for marking. I'll give you marks, reading the professionalism and the thoughts that I've passed on you. And after that, I'll have some classes of these questions on the exam practice platform so that you have an idea that how to attempt paper on the practice platform as well, right? So that you have an idea that how to attempt paper on the exam practice platform, right? So this is all from my side. In the next classes, you will be having the solutions of these questions. You can attempt by yourself. I've sent you in the PDF and then can send it to me for checking as well, right? Also, if you guys want to come in contact with me, so my WhatsApp number is +923312623849. You can WhatsApp me for further discussion as well, right? You can WhatsApp me for further discussion as well. Okay, so thank you all of you for attending. See you in the next class.